Welcome to Washington Today on C-SPAN Radio for Monday, September 25th, 2023. Senator Robert Menendez, Democrat of New Jersey, says he is not guilty and will not resign following his indictment on federal corruption and bribery charges. Senator Menendez is accused of using his influence to benefit three businessmen and the government of Egypt. He said the $500,000 in cash found in his home was from his personal savings, not from bribes, and he kept it there for emergencies. Less than a week until a possible federal government shutdown, unless the regular annual appropriations bills or a short-term stopgap measure is passed by Congress and signed into law. Coming up, we'll hear from Speaker Kevin McCarthy, President Joe Biden, and Politico congressional reporter Katherine Tully-McManus about what to expect this week. Also, Agriculture Secretary Tom Vilsack stops by the White House briefing room talking about the effects of a possible shutdown on some of the new federal nutrition programs. State Department has asked about two Molotov cocktails thrown at the Cuba embassy in Washington this past weekend. And tonight is the next episode of C-SPAN's Books That Shaped America, with a focus on The Federalist. We'll talk with C-SPAN's Vice President Peter Kiley about our accompanying website, where you can get a lot more information about the books in the series and also give your feedback. The story from the New York Times: Senator Robert Menendez, Democrat of New Jersey, returned Monday to Union City, the community where he rose to political prominence, to offer a clear answer to former allies who have called for his resignation in the face of federal bribery charges. No. It was the first time he had appeared publicly since federal prosecutors in Manhattan unsealed a 39-page indictment on Friday that accused him and his wife, Nadine Menendez, of accepting hundreds of thousands of dollars in bribes in exchange for wielding his political influence to benefit the government of Egypt and business associates in New Jersey. Investigators found $550,000 in cash and 13 bars of gold bullion during a June 2022 search of a safe deposit box and the couple's home in Inglewood Cliffs, New Jersey. That reporting from the New York Times. Here is Senator Menendez's full statement. Runs 10 minutes.
On Friday, the Southern District of New York brought charges against me. I understand how deeply concerning this can be. However, the allegations leveled against me are just that, allegations. For anyone who has known me throughout my 50 years of public service, they know I have always fought for what is right. My advocacy has always been grounded in what I learned from growing up as a son of Cuban refugees, especially my mom, my hero, Evangelina Menendez. Everything I've accomplished, I've worked for, despite the naysayers and everyone who has underestimated me. I recognize this will be the biggest fight yet, but as I have stated throughout this whole process, I firmly believe that when all the facts are presented, not only will I be exonerated, but I still will be the New Jersey's senior senator. For now, I want to address four things. First, a cornerstone of the foundation of American democracy and our justice system is the principle that all people are presumed innocent until proven guilty. All people. I ask for nothing more and deserve nothing less. The court of public opinion is no substitute for our revered justice system. We cannot set aside the presumption of innocence for political expediency when the harm is irrevocable. To those who have rushed to judgment, you have done so based on a limited set of facts framed by the prosecution to be as salacious as possible. Remember, prosecutors get it wrong sometimes. Sadly, I know that. Instead of waiting for all the facts to be presented, others have rushed to judgment because they see a political opportunity for themselves or those around them. All I humbly ask for in this moment, in my colleagues in Congress, the elected leaders, and the advocates of New Jersey that I have worked with for years, as well as each person who calls New Jersey home, is to pause and allow for all the facts to be presented. Second, my long record on Egypt. One fact is indisputable. Throughout my time in Congress, I have remained steadfast on the side of civil society and human rights defenders in Egypt and everywhere else in the world. If you look at my actions related to Egypt during the period described in this indictment, and throughout my whole career. My record is clear and consistent in holding Egypt accountable for its unjust detention of American citizens and others, its human rights abuses, its deepening relationship with Russia, and efforts that have eroded the independence of the nation's judiciary, among a myriad of concerns. In 2017, I led a bipartisan letter to then-President Trump expressing grave concern with the worsening situation for human rights and civil society in Egypt. That same year, I sent a letter to the Senate Appropriations Subcommittee supporting U.S. assistance to Egypt as long as Egypt adhered to the Camp David Accords and urged the Appropriations Committee to include the requirements for assistance reform strategies outlined in the Egypt Assistance Reform Act of 2013. In 2018, I urged Secretary Tillerson to focus more on human rights issues in Egypt and raised concerns that the electoral environment ahead of Egypt's elections at the time was not free, fair, and credible. In 2019, I met with President el-Sisi at the Munich Security Conference and emphasized the level of repression inside of Egypt, risking eroding our security cooperation and raising concerns about Egypt's intent to purchase a Russian missile system. In 2020, spoke on the Senate floor for International Women's Day and cited the cases of Marinor El-Masri, a human rights lawyer, and Ezra Abdel Fattah, a human rights activist and reporter who were unjustly detained in Egypt for fighting for human rights, democracy, and a free press. I have placed holds on foreign military sales funding to Egypt, and in the presence of other United States senators, I have challenged President Sisi directly on human rights abuses, arbitrary detention, and press freedoms. And the list goes on. Throughout my 30 years in the House of Representatives and the Senate, I have always worked to hold accountable those countries, including Egypt, for human rights abuses, the repression of its citizenry, civil society, and more.
Senator Robert Menendez.
Now are attempting to malign my actions as it relates to Egypt simply don't know the facts. Third, for 30 years, I have withdrawn thousands of dollars in cash from my personal savings account, which I have kept for emergencies and because of the history of my family facing confiscation in Cuba. Now, this may seem old-fashioned, but these were monies drawn from my personal savings account based on the income that I have lawfully derived over those 30 years. I look forward to addressing other issues at trial. 4, I want to speak directly to the people of New Jersey. As I started these remarks, you're the reason why I have dedicated the entirety of my adult life to improving the lives of hardworking New Jerseyans and all Americans. Some of the people calling for my resignation for political reasons say I have lost the trust of the people of New Jersey. That couldn't be more wrong. Today, I'm surrounded by everyday people and constituents who know me. They are here because I fought for important health care policies like the Affordable Care Act, access to reproductive health care, funding for community health centers, and lowering the cost of prescription drugs. They are here because I have fought for working people, those who work 5 to 9, to support those working from 9 to 5. I've always advocated for the right of workers to organize for better wages and working conditions, and have been a staunch supporter of delivering critical services like affordable child care to better support working families. They are here because when New Jersey was in the darkest days following Superstorm Sandy, I never relented in making sure that New Jerseyans were made whole and had the resources to rebuild stronger and more resilient than before. They are here because during the worst pandemic in a century, I went to bat for small business owners throughout the state to ensure they could keep their doors open and their employees on the payroll. They are here because when state and local governments were faced with excruciating decision of having to lay off frontline responders, police officers, and firefighters during the pandemic, I delivered billions in federal funding and investments to keep our state, cities, and towns and hospitals afloat. They are here because throughout my career, and some may not have liked the positions I've taken, I have stood against authoritarian regimes in Iran and its desire to achieve nuclear weapons, or Cuba and its dictatorship, or authoritarianism in Turkey, Venezuela, Russia, and wherever in the world where human rights and democracy have been threatened. And they are here because I have made it my life's work about protecting refugees and immigrants who come to our shores seeking a better future for their children, just as my family did. They are here because during the past 30 years, I have fought tooth and nail so New Jersey would receive critical infrastructure funding and fought against the forces that tried to dismantle the Gateway Project. They are here because since my earliest days in Congress, I have repeatedly stood up to the gun lobby to stop illegal firearms from claiming too many lives and destroying communities. They are here because when tragedy struck one of New Jersey's federal judges, I made a promise that I would not stop until I passed a law to better protect the dedicated public servants in the judiciary. And last year, I delivered passing legislation signed into law by the President that will better protect judges and their families. And they are here because I never gave up on delivering justice for 9/11 families, especially the widows and children of those killed who were previously and unfairly excluded from the U.S. victims of state-sponsored terrorism. And in December, working with others, I delivered billions of dollars in long overdue federal relief to that community and other U.S. victims of terror. They are here because when other members of Congress wanted to turn their backs on our veterans and not pass the PACT Act to provide health care for our veterans who were exposed to toxic burn pits, I was there. And they are here because I successfully passed legislation to better serve World War II vets as well as those suffering from Gulf War illnesses. For now, I remain focused on continuing to do the important work I do every day on behalf of the 9 million people who call New Jersey home, including doing everything we can this week to avoid a government shutdown, deliver critical funding for states affected by catastrophic natural disasters, and ensure the people of Ukraine have everything they need to defeat Putin. And I'll return to Washington this week to do exactly that.
Senator Bob Menendez, Democrat from New Jersey, at Hudson County Community College's campus in Union City, New Jersey, where he grew up. He went on to repeat the statement you just heard in Spanish and then did not take any reporters' questions. Many of the top Democratic leaders in New Jersey have called on Senator Menendez to resign, including members of Congress Mikey Sherrill, Andy Kim, Bill Pascrell, Frank Pallone, Josh Gottheimer. Also, the governor, Phil Murphy, and one U.S. senator has called on Senator Menendez to resign, John Fetterman, Democrat from Pennsylvania. Also calling on him to resign, Congressman Andy Kim, Democrat of New Jersey, who posted on X on Saturday after calls to resign. Senator Menendez said, "I'm not going anywhere. As a result, I feel compelled to run against him. Not something I expected to do, but New Jersey deserves better. We cannot jeopardize the Senate or compromise our integrity." And he'll challenge him in the Democratic primary for that Senate seat for 2024. The story from Reuters, the probe is the third time Senator Menendez has been under investigation by federal prosecutors, though he has never been convicted. Senator Menendez, his wife, and the businessmen are expected to appear in Manhattan federal court on Wednesday. The charges Senator Menendez and his wife face carry a sentence of up to 45 years in prison, but judges in these types of cases usually impose less than the maximum possible sentence. This is Washington Today. From the Washington Examiner, with just 6 days until federal funding is set to lapse, House Speaker Kevin McCarthy is expressing cautious optimism that he can wrangle enough members of his party to begin advancing appropriations bills as a temporary stopgap measure to avert a government shutdown this weekend. However, the Republican leader is acknowledging it won't be without challenges. We'll hear from Speaker McCarthy in just a couple of minutes, but first we spoke with Politico's congressional reporter Katherine Tully-McManus about what to expect in the House and Senate starting tomorrow when Congress returns to session.
What we expect is kind of the push and pull in the House to continue. Over the weekend, Speaker Kevin McCarthy decided to keep $300 million in Ukraine aid in a potential package that he hopes to put on the floor this week for his conference to vote on to potentially avert a government shutdown. However, as it was the case last week, this package is packed with Republican priorities, especially on immigration and the border, which gives it no chance in the democratically controlled Senate. Meanwhile, in the Senate, they are preparing a vehicle for a continuing resolution, a stopgap spending bill, so that they can move quickly to move forward on spending legislation to avert that shutdown, but it's unlikely that they would take up whatever the House is considering at this point, this Republican-led effort. The House will also be taking up 4 individual spending bills, which of course is part of Kevin McCarthy's promise to his conference to pass the 12 individual spending bills for the next fiscal year, one by one, in order to not have a huge omnibus situation at the end of the year. His members wanted to see top-line numbers for each bill so that they could do a little calculation and also to keep a closer eye on what is going into those bills. However, with the number of days left until the end of the month, passing those individual bills to avert a shutdown is virtually impossible. They are wildly out of line with what Democrats would agree to in the Senate. And so once again, you find this divided government is pretty far from a solution. To avert a government shutdown, it is looking more and more likely.
To the appropriations bill, you said wildly different. Is that because the top line numbers that were agreed upon for the debt ceiling, if I remember correctly, has that changed, and by how much?
Yes. So the Senate, both Republicans and Democrats in the Senate on the Appropriations Committee have come together, and they are sticking to the spending levels agreed to from the debt limit agreement, which included Speaker Kevin McCarthy and President Joe Biden. However, McCarthy was under immense pressure from Republicans in the House, and we're looking at massive spending cuts in those individual spending bills proposed in the House. The continuing resolution that is under discussion in the House would be basically an 8% spending cut, not including defense and veterans. Those two have been protected from that dramatic spending cut that Republicans are proposing.
When it comes to House Republicans, who is Speaker McCarthy's, I guess, largest opponent at this point?
There is about a handful of real hard conservatives, some of them members of the House Freedom Caucus, but not necessarily representative of that group as a whole. So we are looking at, in last week, we saw about between 5 and 8 objectors within his conference that over and over again were taking procedural measures to move on to these spending bills that were part of Kevin McCarthy's promise. And so it's such a small contingency of his very, very narrow majority. But even that number of Republicans disagreeing with him and the larger conference can bring down a bill on the floor.
Katherine Tully-McManus, Politico, Congress reporter and Huddle newsletter author on C-SPAN's Washington Journal this morning. Speaker Kevin McCarthy, Republican from California, spoke to reporters in the U.S. Capitol building today for about 5 minutes.
Will the House be voting on the rules tomorrow? Yes. Take up the rule. If we're able to pass those other 4 bills, remember we've had these posted since July, but we had some members, you remember back even before then, that would shut the floor down. We couldn't do anything. Apparently they're willing to work now, so we could have an opportunity if we pass those 5, the one we already passed plus the other 4, that'd be 72% of the discretionary spending already. The goal has always been to not allow any more omnibus. I'm proud to say we have stopped that by putting in the debt ceiling a 1% cut across the board if you don't do all 12. Remember what an omnibus is, that no bill goes through committee. All these bills have gone through committee. The Senate has now taken theirs through committee. Unfortunately, the Senate has not passed any appropriation bills. So let's get this going. Let's make sure the government stays open while we finish doing our job, passing all the individual bills and getting this done.
Do you think that the appropriation bills, passing those, might have a chance of shaking loose the votes for CR and helping?
Well, you have to keep the government open. I mean, if people want to close the government, it only makes them weaker. Why would they want to stop paying the troops or stop paying the border agents or the Coast Guard? I don't understand how that makes you stronger. I don't understand what point you're trying to make. We've got a border that's wide open today. We say it's getting worse each month under Joe Biden. We've got now border agents you saw this morning being bloodied. Why would you want to stop paying those individuals? I couldn't understand somebody that would want to do that.
But if you make the progress on the individual appropriation bills, do you think that builds momentum to help avoid that outcome?
Well, it's always been my intention, but there's always a handful of people can stop anything. That same handful stopped us earlier in the year from doing anything on the floor. They stopped us from bringing up the individual bills. Remember, back in July, we wanted to bring the ag bill up. And remember, the ag bill on the appropriation was chaired by Andy Harris, a member of the Freedom Caucus. It's the most conservative bill you've ever seen, and still they would not allow that to come up. And if you continue to vote against the rule for even allowing a bill to be debated, I don't quite understand that argument. That's interesting.
So if you're moving appropriations bills, sir, then have you begun talks about moving a continuing resolution as well?
Well, you've got to be able to keep government open. I mean, and when you look at what the work that the members were able to do on keeping the government open, but at the same time securing the border, I think you would find a lot of support on both sides of the aisle for that. I know across America that's where they want.
Can you put a CR to a vote before the appropriations bills?
Well, we're going to first put up the rule to be able to do the appropriation bills, and then we could move to the next.
How soon could a CR be voted on then?
Well, we've got the CR working now, so we could do it at any time.
What's the plan on Ukraine funding? Obviously, you met with President Zelensky last week. There are some members in your caucus who oppose that. What are your thoughts? Is that something you would bring up for an individual vote?
That's supplemental. That's something taking up difference. I truly think we need to deal with the disasters that have happened in America. I don't understand why the president would want to tie those two together, and especially why the president would want to ignore the American border. I would want to deal with that.
Speaker
first.
McCarthy, if the Senate passes as a bill to fund the government for a short period of time with no spending cuts that includes a supplemental for Ukraine and disaster aid, would you put it on the floor of the House?
I'd be shocked if the Senate passed anything. They were supposed to pass any appropriation bills for the last 3 weeks. They haven't passed one. So your hypothetical is always interesting to me. If the Senate did something, did the Senate do anything when it came to the debt ceiling? No, they totally ignored everything. Did the Senate do anything about securing the border? No, they've ignored that. Where the House has passed a bill to secure the border and the Senate won't bring it up. Has the Senate done anything for our children's education so our parents have a right, a parent's bill of rights? The House have passed. The Senate has done nothing. Has the Senate done anything to lower the price of gas in America? No. Why? In the House, we've been able to pass H.R. 1 to make energy in America energy independent, but also lower the price of energy in America, and they have ignored it. So you can continue to ask me anything. What if the Senate, I don't care what the issue is, I have not seen the Senate take any actions on the things that America cares most about. Inflation, lowering the cost of energy in America, letting the parents have a say in their kids' education. They continue to stop that movement. And when the House passes appropriation bills, they still have not been able to do any of that either.
So do you believe you can pass a CR and send it to the Senate before?
Look, I'm a believer in everything, yeah. I never give up. Thank you all.
When would you guys vote on the CR?
House Speaker Kevin McCarthy, Republican from California, meeting with reporters today in the U.S. Capitol building. He mentioned that the first vote on the combined rule for 4 appropriations bills for fiscal year 2024 will take place on Tuesday. The House is back for morning hour speeches. Members can speak up to 5 minutes on any subject they want. That's at noon Eastern on Tuesday. Legislative business begins at 2 p.m. Eastern, but there'll be no recorded votes until at least 6:30 p.m. Eastern, allowing members to return to Washington from the weekend. Roll Call has an article. House Republicans on Saturday set up the floor debate for this upcoming week on the 4 fiscal year 2024 appropriations bills after making combined cuts of nearly $3.8 billion from agriculture and foreign aid programs compared with original committee-reported versions. The other 2 bills are the Homeland Security Department and the Defense Department. And Roll Call notes that there are 440 amendments to those bills made in order by that rule. President Joe Biden talked about government spending and the possibility of a shutdown if there's no stopgap measure by October 1st. He spoke as he met with his president's board of advisors for HBCUs at the White House.
I want to say a word about those in Congress who are willing to shut down the government. Just a few months ago, the Speaker of the House and I agreed to spending levels for the government. We were up right to the very edge, almost reneged on our debt, and that we're going to fund essential priorities and still cut the deficit by $1 trillion over the next decade. Now a small group of extreme House Republicans, they don't want to live up to that deal, and everyone in America could be faced with paying the price for that. We're changing it. We made a deal. We shook hands. We said this is what we're going to do, and now they're reneging on the deal, which is not much of a surprise these days. And the black community in particular is going to suffer if that occurs. For example, shutdown is going to risk nutrition assistance to nearly 7 million moms and children. It's going to disproportionately affect black families. The Department of Housing and Urban Development will have to stop nearly all its enforcement work fighting housing discrimination. EPA would have to stop its important work bringing environmental justice in frontline and fence line communities because most of the inspections and hazardous waste sites and chemical facilities would come to a halt. The historic work we're doing to increase the share of federal contract dollars going to small disadvantaged businesses would be disrupted. Funding the government is one of the most basic fundamental responsibilities of Congress, and if the Republicans in the House don't start doing their job, we should stop electing them.
President Biden at the White House today at the start of a meeting dealing with funding for HBCUs, historically black colleges and universities. The Agriculture Secretary Tom Vilsack joined the regular White House press conference today talking about the effects of a government shutdown on programs run by his department.
WIC is a program that impacts and affects over 50% of all the newborns in this country. Nearly 7 million pregnant moms, new mothers, and young children count on WIC every single day to receive support, nutrition assistance support. With a shutdown, what we would see across the United States is a denial of those benefits and opportunities. In some cases, it would be literally within a matter of days after the shutdown. In some cases, it may be, in some states, it may be literally in a matter of weeks. But clearly, during the course of a shutdown, millions of those moms, babes, and young children would see a lack of nutrition assistance. And it's not just the WIC program, as important and significant as that is. It's also about our farm economy. Now is a time when farmers are harvesting their crops, and they're seeking marketing loans, which allow them and assist them in ensuring that they get a decent price for their crop. When we have a shutdown, Farm Service Agency offices in virtually every county of this country shut down, and those loans are not available. It's not just about farm loans. It's about newlyweds who have decided to purchase their first home in a rural small town. Perhaps they're getting a loan guarantee from a bank that is guaranteed by USDA, or perhaps they're getting a direct loan from USDA to be able to purchase that home. With a shutdown, those loans don't take place. And it's conceivable in those circumstances, not only are they not able to close the loan, it's also conceivable that they may lose the deal. So this is a matter of real consequences when we are faced with a shutdown. It's not just about rural America, it's also about our natural resources. As you probably know, the USDA is responsible for maintaining 195 million acres of national forests and grasslands. These are often places where people go to recreate. And when they do, they provide tourism dollars to communities in which they are going and spending time. When we have a shutdown, those national forests shut down and they're closed. And so those family trips don't take place, and those tourism dollars are not spent, and the jobs they support are at risk.
The Agriculture Secretary Tom Vilsack in the White House briefing room today. On Wall Street, the Dow up 43, NASDAQ up 59, and S&P up 17 points. President Biden putting out a statement on the announcement that the Writers Guild of America and the Alliance of Motion Picture and Television Producers have reached a tentative agreement ending a 5-month strike. The president writes this agreement, including assurances related to artificial intelligence, did not come easily, but its formation is a testament to the power of collective bargaining. There simply is no substitute for employers and employees coming together to negotiate in good faith toward an agreement that makes a business stronger and secures the pay, benefits, and dignity that workers deserve. I urge all employers to remember that all workers, including writers, actors, and auto workers, deserve a fair share of the value their labor helped create. That statement from President Biden. The actors are still on strike, as are the members of the United Auto Workers, the UAW. And President Biden plans to travel to Michigan to join a picket line as UAW continues to strike against the three big U.S. auto manufacturers, GM, Ford, and Stellantis. The president was asked about it today.
Mr. President, do you support the UAW demands?
I think the UAW gave up an incredible amount back when the automobile industry was going under. They gave everything from their pensions on, and they saved the automobile industry. And I think that now that the industry is roaring back, they should participate in the benefit of that. And if you take a look at the significant increase in salaries for the executives and growth of the industry, they should benefit from it. So yes, I always support the UAW.
Thanks, guys. Let's go. Thank you.
President Biden at the White House today. He'll be traveling to Michigan on Tuesday to join the UAW picket line. Former President Donald Trump, a Republican presidential candidate, plans to address striking auto workers in Michigan on Wednesday. Washington Today continues in a moment.
Live Tuesday on C-SPAN Radio at 12:30 p.m. Eastern, Virginia's Republican Governor Glenn Youngkin discusses his policy priorities, the 2023 Virginia elections, and other topics. The program will be hosted by the Economic Club of D.C. Governor Glenn Youngkin, live Tuesday at 12:30 p.m. Eastern on C-SPAN Radio. Listen and watch anywhere on the C-SPAN Now free mobile app.
Welcome back to Washington Today, available as a podcast wherever you find your podcasts and also on the C-SPAN Now mobile app. The U.S. State Department is reacting to the news that the Embassy of Cuba in Washington, D.C., according to Cuba's Minister of Foreign Affairs, Bruno Rodriguez Perea, was the target of a terrorist attack when 2 Molotov cocktails were tossed at the building on Sunday night. The embassy is saying in a statement the Cuban embassy's staff have not been injured. Here's the question to the State Department spokesperson, Matthew Miller.
Matt, go ahead.
Well, I just want to know if you have anything to say about this Molotov cocktail at the Cuba embassy. If you haven't done it already, I'm sorry I was late.
No, I haven't. First of all, attacks and threats against diplomatic facilities are unacceptable. We are in contact with Cuban embassy officials, and consistent with our obligations under the Vienna Conventions, the department is committed to the safety and security of diplomatic facilities and the diplomats who work in them. Our State Department's Diplomatic Security Service works closely with law enforcement agencies to protect and maintain the security and safety of foreign missions in the United States, and we are doing that now with respect to this particular attack in coordination with the Washington, D.C. Metropolitan Police Department.
Okay, and you don't really have any more information, or do you have any more information about?
State Department spokesperson Matthew Miller. The Embassy of Cuba reopened in Washington in 2015 when formal diplomatic relations between the U.S. and Cuba were normalized. There was also a reported attack in 2020 when someone shot at the embassy. The administrator of USAID, U.S. Agency for International Development, Samantha Power, is in Armenia to, according to the agency's account on X, formerly Twitter, affirm the U.S. support for Armenia's sovereignty, independence, and territorial integrity, and to discuss measures to address the humanitarian crisis in Nagorno-Karabakh. This follows Azerbaijan's successful military offensive retaking control of that disputed area. Back to the State Department with spokesperson Matthew Miller.
Could you comment on the latest that's happened? We've seen a stream of people fleeing, or ethnic Armenians fleeing Nagorno-Karabakh. How concerned are you with the situation and the assurances that Azerbaijan has given about allowing ethnic minorities to stay there? Do you take that at face value, or are you confident that that's the case?
We are concerned about the situation. I will say that in terms of what we think is important, it's number one, that the ceasefire that exists now be maintained, that there is no further military action. Number two, that the humanitarian needs of the people of Nagorno-Karabakh are addressed. And number three, that Azerbaijan and Armenia reach a lasting peace agreement. With respect to the humanitarian situation on the ground, the population of ethnic Armenians in Nagorno-Karabakh should be able to remain in their homes in peace and dignity with respect for their rights and security if they choose to do so. Those who want to leave and return should be allowed safe passage, overseen by a neutral, independent third party. And Azerbaijan has a responsibility to protect civilians and ensure the humane treatment of all, including those it suspects of being combatants.
A couple things on that. the Armenians have called for some sort of international monitoring, whether it's through the UN or through other partners. Is that something the United States supports or would work toward?
We do believe there should be an international mission to provide transparency, reassurance, and confidence to the residents of Nagorno-Karabakh and the international community that their rights and security will be protected consistent with the public statements that Azerbaijan has made.
State Department spokesperson Matthew Miller at his news conference at the State Department in Washington. Some updates on the war in Ukraine. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky says that U.S. Abrams tanks have arrived in Ukraine and are, in his words, getting prepared to reinforce our brigades. And Ukraine claims that the commander of Russia's Black Sea Fleet, Admiral Viktor Sokolov, was killed in a Ukrainian attack in Sevastopol on Friday. Sevastopol is one of the largest cities on the Crimean Peninsula that was annexed by Russia in 2014. And U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken is calling Russia and North Korea's cooperation a two-way street that is increasingly dangerous. Secretary Blinken spoke in Washington at the Center for Strategic and International Studies Republic of Korea U.S. Strategic Forum.
Today, that commitment to mutual defense is ironclad. And that starts with extended deterrence, particularly in the face of the DPRK's provocative actions, including its missile launches, which, as everyone here knows, violate multiple UN Security Council resolutions and undermine stability on the peninsula and beyond. Beyond the launches themselves, the DPRK's threats to broader security were demonstrated clearly by Kim Jong-un's visit to Moscow this month. Now, we're seeing this as a two-way street that is increasingly dangerous, with, on the one hand, a Russia desperate to find equipment, supplies, technology for its ongoing aggression against Ukraine, but also a DPRK that is looking for help to strengthen and advance its own missile programs. We're working hand in hand with other partners and allies to highlight the dangerous ways Russia and North Korea's military cooperation threaten global peace and security. In April, President Biden and President Yoon pledged to significantly strengthen U.S.-ROK coordination through the Washington Declaration, committing to engage in deeper cooperative decision-making on nuclear deterrence, including through enhanced dialogue and enhanced information sharing, discussing nuclear and strategic planning, enhancing the visibility of U.S. strategic asset deployments to the Korean Peninsula, including by restarting port visits of nuclear-capable submarines, and expanding the cooperation and coordination between our militaries. Already, in just the space of a few months, we're translating the declaration into concrete action.
Secretary of State Antony Blinken today at the CSIS Forum in Washington on U.S.-South Korean relations. Tonight at 9 p.m. Eastern, C-SPAN continues our Books That Shaped America with a look at The Federalist, the series of essays published in 1788 urging ratification of the newly drafted U.S. Constitution. That's live 9 p.m. Eastern on C-SPAN Radio, C-SPAN Television, streamed at cspan.org, and on our C-SPAN Now mobile app, which is free. And for more information about this segment and the series, we have a website. We spoke about it with C-SPAN's Vice President, Peter Kiley.
Thanks for letting me have an opportunity to talk a little about a website that we've created to go along with our new Books That Shaped America program series. If viewers would like to visit cspan.org/Books That Shaped America, all one word, they'll find there a comprehensive collection of resources to showcase the series of programs and a slew of supplementary materials. If they go to the site, they'll find in the top red bar at the very right the word Preview. Click that Preview button and you'll see a 60-minute program with Carla Hayden, she's the current Librarian of Congress, interviewing author and historian Doug Brinkley, where they discuss each of the 10 books in pretty quick detail. It's an interesting, quick overview to see sort of what the impact is of each of these books. On the website, you'll find a feature page on each of the 10 books. And on that page, you'll be able to watch each of the programs in the series. You'll find a summary of the importance of each book. It's a brief bio of the author, and there you can find a link to our companion podcast that goes into deeper detail on the life of the author. Also on the page, you'll find some video vignettes of scholars from the Library of Congress and other relevant materials. We've dug deep into the C-SPAN video library to feature several related videos, and there's a collection of pretty cool images from that era in time or that are specific to the book. On the website for teachers, you'll find a link that gives you myriad resources to help take advantage of this series and turn students onto these classics and help you with lesson plans and guides to teach each of these 10 titles. One of the really cool things we're doing with the website is collecting viewer input. It's always important for C-SPAN to hear from our viewers, to hear voices from across America with what you think might be a book that shaped America. So if you visit the website, cspan.org/books that shaped America, you'll find at the top of the page in the red bar a button that says Viewer Input. There you'll see a drop-down menu that allows viewers to use their computers or phones to record a 30-second message about which book you believed helped shape America. Your message can be recorded there and stored there on the website in a video gallery, and it may be used on C-SPAN TV as part of the Books That Shaped America program. Hey, please check out the video library gallery to see how it works, and we hope you'll participate in that.
C-SPAN's Vice President Peter Kiley and Books That Shaped America. The series continues tonight, 9 p.m. Eastern, with The Federalist on C-SPAN Radio, C-SPAN Television, streamed at cspan.org, and on the C-SPAN Now app. And if you go to our website, cspan.org/Books That Shaped America, two of the vignettes for tonight include a Library of Congress historian Julie Miller discussion about James Madison's letters between James Madison and Thomas Jefferson, and also a walking tour of Alexander Hamilton's New York, related to the authors of The Federalist. And thank you for listening to Washington Today. Sign up for C-SPAN's evening newsletter word for word and get the stories making headlines in Washington emailed to you every day. Subscribe at cspan.org/connect. Have a good night.